If I shut my eyes, I see it all before me. Pieces of chicken, rice, and my faithful Raja exhorting me to eat. You must eat, madam, for you don't know what is going to happen. I went to the front balcony. The pumice had been falling for hours, but in pieces no bigger than peas. But then I saw Jeremoidi coming up the garden with a lantern, who said to me in a very worried manner, "The sea ghost, Anto Loet, is close by. The sea has gone. Far, far away I hear the waves." "How can it have gone?" I asked. "Come and see. It should now be high tide. It is a worrying sight, for all the coral reefs along the coast are now dried out." My eldest boy was playing on the sofa. I was lying on the bed and feeding my youngest son. Then I heard, above the noise of the pumice falling on the roof, above the thunder of the mountain, a frightful roaring which approached at lightning speed. I leapt up, clutching my youngest son. The wave reached the house, but it didn't go further than the backyard. It destroyed the office and the outhouses, and my husband and Mr. Tajoka were only able to escape by climbing up a coconut tree. As soon as the wave receded, my husband rushed to the house but was unable to get upstairs as the stairs had been washed away. The family escaped, wading through paddy fields and up to a hut on the side of the nearby hill. At about 5 a.m. I wanted to look outside. What I saw there. Thousands of tons of fire lit up the surroundings. On tops of the trees I saw flames. I heard a crack and saw a sheet of fire right next to me. The sea was not to be seen. Everything was covered in ash. I could not see my hand before me. Later that morning, someone burst in shouting, "Shut the doors, shut the doors." Suddenly it was pitch dark. The last thing I saw was the ash being pushed through the cracks in the floorboards like a fountain. I felt a heavy pressure throwing me to the ground. Then it seemed as if the air was being sucked away and I could not breathe. Large lumps clattered down on my head, my back, my arms. I could not stand. I felt people rolling over me. I was kicked and I felt a foot on a part of my body. I didn't realise I had been burnt, and everything which came into contact with me was hot ash mixed with moisture. After much effort, propping my hands on my knees, I tottered to the door. I knew it was in the corner. It was stuck fast. I fell to my knees in the ash. Later, I forced myself through the opening. I looked at the stairs, tripped and fell. The ash was hot, and the hot bite of the pumice pricked like needles. When I had walked about 15 paces, I became entangled in a nightmare of branches, entirely stripped of leaves. I noticed for the first time that my skin was hanging off, thick and moist from the ash stuck to it. I didn't know I had been burned.
That extraordinary description describes the phenomenon was, this was the first eruption where those phenomena were very closely described. Essentially, the first feature was a tsunami, and those who remember some of the eyewitness accounts of the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004 can recognise very similar features. In fact, the same sorts of areas of both Indonesia and Sri Lanka were affected during the 1883 tsunami as in the 2004 tsunami. The tsunamis at Krakatoa were caused not by the collapse of the volcanic island, but actually by the arrival of what we call pyroclastic clouds, pyroclastic density currents. And it's the second feature when the house goes dark and which it gets burnt, which is when one of these pyroclastic currents runs through the house. Another source of eyewitness accounts were from ships. The island of Krakatoa is in the Sunda Strait as a major trading route.
Captain Watson on the Charles Pyle sailed past the eruption at the climax of the event. At 2:30 p.m. on August 26th, we noticed some agitation about the point of Krakatoa. Clouds, or something being propelled from the northeast point with great velocity. At 3:30, we heard above us and about the island a strange sound, as a mighty crackling fire, or the discharge of heavy artillery at 1 or 2 second intervals. 5, the roaring noise continued. Darkness spread over the sky, and a hail of pumice stone fell on us, of which many pieces were of considerable size and quite warm. We had to cover the skylights to save the glass, while our feet and heads had to be protected with boots and sou'westers. While an intense blackness covered the sky and land and sea, we sailed on our course until at 7 p.m. we got what we thought was the sight of the 4th Point light, then brought the ship to the wind, since we knew not what might be in the strait. The night was a fearful one. The blinding fall of sand and stones, the intense blackness above and around, broken only by the incessant glare of varied kinds of lightning, and the continuous explosive roars of Krakatoa made our situation an awful one. At 11 p.m, the island, 11 miles away, became visible. Chains of fire appeared to ascend and descend between it and the sky, while on the southwest end there seemed to be a continuous roll of balls of white fire. The wind, though strong, was hot and choking, sulphurous, with a smell as of burning cinders. The lead came up from the bottom at 30 fathoms, quite warm. The mastheads and yard arms were studded with phosphorescent lights and touched with a peculiar pink flame that came from the fleecy clouds around. At 6 a.m, being able to see the Java shore, we set sail, hoisted our signal letter by the 4th Point lighthouse, but got no answer. At 8:30 we passed Ansdell, close in enough to see the houses, but we did not see a single moving thing on land or sea. At 10:15 there was a fearful explosion in the direction of Krakatoa, by then 30 miles distant. We saw a wave rush right over Button Island, sweeping entirely over the southern side, rising 50 or 60 feet and continuing on to the Java shore. This was evidently a wave of translation, for it was not felt on the ship. This we saw repeated twice. At the same time, the sky rapidly covered in, and then commenced a downpour of mud, sand, and I know not what. This horrible state of downpour of mud and debris continued until 2 p.m, and by 5 p.m, the horizon was just visible. The ship, from truck to waterline, was as if cemented. Sails, blocks and ropes in a terrible mess. But nobody hurt, nor was the ship damaged.
So one of the other interesting aspects of the Krakatoa eruption is that it was a colossal eruption. It's changed the shape of the islands in the Sunda Strait overnight. But residents of the Northern Hemisphere have a rather more ethereal experience of the volcanic eruption. Because several months later, we've seen some of these images in the slideshow, several months later, the sulphur that had been lofted high into the atmosphere by the volcanic eruption, originally lofted up as sulphur dioxide gas, has now reacted in the stratosphere, turned into tiny particles of sulfuric acid, sulfate. And as those droplets spread across the globe, you've got tremendous afterglow effects during the twilight. So between November and December 1883, and then stretching through 1884, people noticed that after sunset, within half an hour after sunset, you've got the most intense colours in the sky. And that's not just the colour that we see today, as the sun's sitting lighting up the clouds. There's actually, these had to be much finer particles, much higher in the atmosphere. So the Krakatoa eruption, it was after the Krakatoa eruption that we discovered for the first time information about the structure of the atmosphere, that material that went high into the atmosphere would then circulate the globe within about 3 weeks, and then spread north and south. And many of the optical phenomena that were recognised first as part of the Krakatoa eruption have subsequently been seen again after later. Thank you.